So I thought that we could do a recap of what we I've decided to divide it into just a very short recap, and then understanding it's very important to understand the kingdom mindset, because that's the way you'll understand the culture of death. And then we need to define health, marriage, sex, and family before we go into gender ideology and understanding how the LGBTQ ideology affects our health. Of course, we need to always define what we're talking about. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, yeah. All right. Okay, let's go right to it. Yeah, I need to talk about my approach. It will be, as usual, as a proud Kenyan, as a medical doctor, as a psychologist, as a mother, grandmother, and also as a Christian, knowing that our constitution refers to Almighty God of all creation, of the universe. And so with that background, we're able to move forward. It's important to know that there are 3 types of information. They can be either the truth or deception or fiction. So the only information that qualifies to be called knowledge is the truth. And so it's always important to know what your source of information is. And that is a truth meter from false to truth. Yeah. So we'll just recap the human life kingdom and the human life cycle and the kingdom mindset. Remember, we talked about God, Almighty God of all creation, being at the center of the universe. We talked about men and women both representing half of humanity and half of the Creator. And they come together in holy matrimony. They have primary roles and secondary roles, and they're supposed to live according to the Creator in complementarity, not competition. And so that they have primary roles, the man being protection, the woman being nurturing, and new life in her womb. And then we talked about the sexuality of the couple, and then we talked about the pregnancy. Then we talked about the child being raised in a healthy family. In this case, this is a nuclear family. Then we talked about the community, and the community being made up of many families, and from the community getting the man and the woman, the next man and woman who will form the next family in marriage. And then the white arrow is going back to Almighty God of all creation, according to having lived a life according to the will of the Creator, or being sent away from the Father according to the life that they have lived. And we said that anything that disrupts the human life cycle is called the culture of death. If any of these parts of the human life cycle are affected or destroyed, then you will ultimately destroy humanity. So it's very important to understand the human life cycle, and it's in a previous talk that we have given. Okay, so there we talked about if you remove any part of the life cycle, be it God, environment, the natural sex roles, matrimony, pregnancy, the child, if you affect the child through abusing him or her, neglecting him or her needs, the family, parenting, or the community will ultimately destroy humanity. Because so there's some definitions we need to go through so that we can move forward, because we find that many definitions have been distorted in today's society. So it's important to know what we're talking about. Marriage, according to the Constitution, is defined as a voluntary union of a man and a woman, whether in a monogamous or polygamous union. And that's according to the Constitution, but we as Christians, we believe in monogamy. Then cohabitation is an intimate union in which two consenting adults of the opposite sex stay together without any contractual agreements or without children. We find that many people who are cohabiting without any commitment, they call themselves married, but we need to be very clear about that. What is marriage and sex for? Marriage is for the procreation and education of children unto eternal life according to the human life cycle and for the good of the spouses. And sex was designed by the Creator to be for bonding or pleasure between the two spouses and procreation of human life. So the husband and wife are co-creators with God. Everything belongs to Him and nothing exists without being created. Sex can also refer to the act or the state of being male or female. There are only two sexes, and so there's no third sex. So the family is the fundamental group unit of society that's related by blood, kinship, adoption, foster care, or the ties of marriage of two persons of the opposite sex, according to the family policy, page 7. When the nuclear family consists of two parents with their biological or adoptive children. You can also have single parent families, intergenerational families, and a healthy family is characterized by, a healthy family is described as a family that meets the psychological and physical needs of its members and has healthy members, particularly the parents. A dysfunctional family is a family that does not meet the needs of its members. So we go to health. As defined by the World Health Organization, is a state of complete infirmity. So it's very important to know that what the but we as the pro-life, pro-family organization, we believe in the duty of the U.S. conception until natural death. And so we found that this definition to be very inadequate. And because you have the human person, you have the human, this is the human person here. We are made up of a body, and we have a soul, and we are spirits. And the soul and the spirit, of course, the spirit, of course, is immortal. And so I am a spirit, and I have a soul, which is my mind, my emotions, and my free will, and I live in a body. So at death, the body and the spirit will be separated. But then, of course, as Christians, we believe in the resurrection at the end of time, when the body and the spirit will be reunited. So then the adverse childhood experiences study shows that this, it still shows how that the current medical model is very inadequate, because emotions affect our health. And the first 7 years of life, everything that we are, most of what we are, brain development is programmed into our first experiences in the first 7 years of life, which affects the hormones, our immune system, and our nervous system. So this is just reiterating that I am a spirit, and my spirit has meaning, purpose, and is able to love. I have a soul. I'm able to make choices out of my own free will, and I have emotions. And when I'm healthy, my intellect acts above my emotions. When I'm unhealthy, my emotions rule over my my intellect. So I actually live in a body. So with this explanation of the human person, we go to the new definition of health, which is the complete physical, mental, family, spiritual, and environmental well-being of a person, and not just the absence of infirmity. So this was made by the pro-life and pro-family organizations in 2019, Familia et Vitae, when we were locked out of the ICPD 29 Sexual and Reproductive Health and Rights Conference. We made our own side event, and we made our own definition of health, which is much more holistic. Then we need to define medicine, which is the study of the diagnosis, treatment, and prevention of disease. Note that pregnancy is not a disease, which is treated as a disease by the World Health Organization. And we also need other professionals like mental health professionals, nutritionists, and chaplains. So medicine does not hold a monopoly over health. That's very important to realize. It's just the physical part. And we have the pillars of medical ethics. Autonomy, we must always respect the patient's right to self-determination and informed consent, because much as we have a free will, when we don't have the information, then we're not able to make free choices. Beneficence is the duty to always do good. Non-maleficence is maleficence is the duty not to do bad. Justice, to treat all people equally and equitably. And remember that pregnancy is not a disease, which has two people who have rights to life, and life begins at conception, according to the Constitution, Article 26. Okay, so well-being and happiness. The definition of health has talked about well-being, and it's a broad concept of how life is going for a person in the individual and the community. So another problem with the current medical model is that apart from separating emotions from health, it separates the individual from the environment and the community. And it attempts to treat a person without the context of the environment, which is quite deficient. So we talk about Maslow's hierarchy of needs. In order to understand, we're still trying to understand the human person, because we need to know who we're talking about. At the basis, we have the physiological needs, which are food, warmth, rest, water, and these ones we cannot do without. Then we have the safety needs after that. Then we have the love and belonging, intimate relationship and friends. Then the self-esteem needs, and then the self-actualization, which is achieving one's full potential, including the creative ability. So this is a healthy person. But now Maslow's hierarchy of needs was expanded to include self-transcendence, which is a sense of meaning and purpose in life. And actually, according to writers like Viktor Frankl, self-actualization is not something we achieve. It's not something that we can achieve without having a sense of meaning and purpose. So this is actually a healthy person, a person who has a sense of meaning and purpose and has connected with the power greater than themselves in whatever form of spirituality. And then we have the 8 dimensions of health, of wellness, which are emotional, financial, social, spiritual, occupational, physical, and intellectual, and environmental. So it's very important to understand what the needs of the human person are before we attempt to talk about health. And a happiness study, which has been done you can find this TED Talk, Lessons from the Longest Study on Happiness. A study was done in Harvard, and it was found that the greatest happiness is found in interpersonal relationships. Positive interpersonal relationships are what keep people happy throughout their lives. So the young men who went to the university 85 years ago
Dr. You can mute the video because you are breaking. You can mute
what
the
the
video.
world teaches as happiness. Okay, so the new definition of well-being is a positive state of affairs in which individuals, relationships, organizations, communities, and the natural environment. And so it's very important that we don't just talk about the physical health, we need to talk about our environment, our interpersonal relationships. And this is a salutogenic approach to wellness, which I prefer, which focuses on what is right with a person and well-being, self-care, empowering, and it is personal and subjective. The current medical model is, there's a lot of focus on pathology and what's wrong with you, and it's very stigmatizing and isolating. So I prefer the positive approach to health. So we're going to talk about the adverse childhood experiences because this is the single most unaddressed public health issue, which is still not being taught in medical schools 30 years after the study in the mid-1990s. So it's very important that we talk about it. The child, as you see here, is both the builder and the building. And he has building blocks that he needs to become the best version of himself or self-actualization. And this is what we call the blueprint that the creator has instilled in each child. Each child is unique and unrepeatable, and the creator has a blueprint of the best version of the child. So the child instinctively knows exactly what they need at each particular moment, whether it's emotional, whether it's psychological, whether it's physical. So the child knows what they need and they reach out to the caregivers who, and if they have healthy caregivers, the caregivers give them what they need in order to become the best version of themselves. And then we have the different developmental stages. From infancy, and each stage has totally dependent on the primary caregiver, and they develop either trust or mistrust according to whether the caregiver meets their needs. And so throughout life, early childhood, preschool, school age, adolescence, you have mainly identity versus role confusion. So this is what I really want to emphasize today. So the people at this age really need to know who I am, where did I come from, where am I going? Because the most important life skill is actually self-awareness and emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence consists of self-awareness and ability to regulate your emotions. Then you have young adulthood, which is looking for intimacy versus isolation. Then you have middle age, then you have maturity. So at each and every stage of life, there's a crisis that needs to be overcome. When you're surrounded by healthy people and healthy environment, then you thrive. When not, then that's when you get pathology. Then you have the psychosexual stages, which are at the infancy. And then you have the toddler stage, when somebody's trying to get blood control and bowel control from 6 to puberty. Then you also have the phallic stage from 3 to 6 years old, and then the genital stage from puberty to death. So when somebody is able to negotiate all these stages by living in a healthy family, then they're able to negotiate them and develop their sexuality in a normal way. So you have psychological trauma. This is this is a cross section of the brain. Unfortunately, we were just taught about the limbic system in one sentence in the whole of medical school, but it's an extremely important system, and that is how we store our emotions, and it affects the whole of our health, according to the adverse childhood experiences study. And so you have the amygdala, which is like the alarm system, and the hippocampus, which restores the memory of what has happened to us in the past. And up to 50 years, if you're not treated for psychological trauma, you can actually have all these, what they call the non-communicable diseases, diabetes, hypertension, stroke, autoimmune diseases, hormonal diseases, even cancer. And so this is something that's very important. And psychological trauma is defined as exposure to actual or threatened death, serious injury, or sexual violation, which causes intense fear, horror, or helplessness. But we also have those big events we call the big T's, and the small T's we call like attachment trauma. When we try to attach to our primary caregiver, and the primary caregiver, either the mother, the father, or whoever it is not healthy, then we suffer from attachment trauma. So the severe consequences, you have 10 types of adverse childhood experiences. You have physical, you have abuse, 3 types of abuse, which can be physical, emotional, or sexual. You have 2 types of neglect, which can be physical or emotional. Then you have household dysfunction, which can be mental illness in a household member, a jailed family member, substance abuse, a mother treated violently, divorce or separation of the parents, growing up without one parent, either through divorce, separation, or a chronic illness or death. So what happens when somebody has adverse childhood experience is that the house that was supposed to be built, which is the personality, the best version, the character of the child, is what we call broken consciousness. And the house, instead of looking perfect like the way it was designed to be, is broken in different places. And so you have broken walls, you have broken windows, you have a broken door. And the good news is that okay, they say that a score of 4 or more out of 10 is severe childhood trauma. But the effects of this can be mitigated by the presence of one healthy adult, emotionally healthy adult in the child's life. The outcomes that I'm going to talk about don't necessarily have to happen. So the existential questions that everybody's asking about whether they're conscious of it is or not is, who am I? Where did I come from? What is my purpose? Where am I going? Where am I now? And how do I get there? So some people actually leave this world without having answered those questions. And it's very important to have identified the answers to these questions. So the adverse childhood experiences, you said that the outcomes are very severe if you have a score of 4 or more without a healthy an emotionally healthy adult to guide you through. You have lowered education, lower occupation, lower income, occupational opportunities. You have risky behaviors, including sexual behaviors, alcohol and drug abuse. You're more likely to get cancer, diabetes, HIV, STDs, unintended pregnancy and pregnancy complications and fetal death, depression, anxiety, suicide. So somebody who has a score of 6 or more is 30 times more likely to die by suicide than somebody with a score of 0. You also have tendency for traumatic brain injury, fractures and burns. So you have health, you have obesity, diabetes, broken bones, behaviors like smoking, alcoholism, and reduced life potential, the more ACEs that you have, according to that graph. Okay, so they also found that among the LGBTQ adults, which we're going to define shortly, they have a much higher adverse childhood experience before the age of 18 than other people. So there's a cause, a dose-related relationship between the adverse childhood experiences of people who identify as LGBTQ plus and others who do not identify as that. So we need to also understand about the sexual revolution ideology, because LGBTQ just belongs to the part which is called the gender ideology. So there's a book that has been written by Dr. Morse from the Ruth Institute, which is a very good book if you can read it. And it's about the sexual state and how elite ideologies are destroying lives. Okay, so the sexual revolution can be divided into three main parts. And it's important to know that there's an ideology which is usually a lie. And so it needs a lot of propaganda in order to perpetuate it. And then it has an aim at the end. Okay, so the contraceptive ideology states that we can separate sex from babies. And of course, biologically, that doesn't happen because sex was designed to produce babies. And then, so what they have as is the contraception and abortion in case contraception fails. And abortion is the deliberate killing of the preborn person. And the aim of this is depopulation of the world. And also you have sterilization and through vaccines and also euthanasia. So that's the contraceptive ideology. The divorce ideology is based on the lie that you can separate both sex and babies from marriage and that children do not need their parents. So basically you do not need marriage to have babies. And this was basically to pave the way for contract parenthood, so that biology could be uncoupled from the legal definition of parenthood, because they were preparing, the proponents of this ideology were preparing to change the definition of marriage into same-sex unions, and obviously that is a sterile arrangement. So there's a lot of money in all these ideologies. You need what we call assisted reproductive technology with easy divorce, cloning, and transhumanism. Yeah, so that's the divorce ideology. Then the gender ideology, which we're going to concentrate on now today, is that the sex of the body is unimportant and differences between men and women are socially constructed. Okay, so that is the lie. And evidence, and the aim of this was to remove the gender requirement for marriage. And to redefine marriage to have. So the fourth part of the ideology is to ensure the destruction of the next generation and through comprehensive sexuality education. And that is what happens. You have 5-year-old children being told that sexual pleasure is their right. So it's basically pornographic. They're taught how to masturbate. They're taught that gender is a spectrum. They're told that they can contracept without parental knowledge. And it's basically grooming children for pedophilia and sex slavery and sexual satanic ritual abuse. There's a movie that came out recently in July, and it's called The Sound of Freedom, and it talks about sex slavery and human trafficking, which of course has been ignored by the mainstream media because it is the truth. It's based on a true story, and it features Jim Caviezel. It's a very good movie. So this is comprehensive sexuality education, which is very harmful to children because it sexualizes them, teaches children to consent to sex, promotes anal and oral sex from the age of 5, promotes homosexual, bisexual behavior and sexual pleasure as a human right. Promoting masturbation. So these are some of the books. It's all one. And Exclaim is Perfectly Normal is another of those books. If you check it, many parents have been complaining about this. And so once you have the sexual and reproductive health and rights legalized in the country, these are the kind of books you have. But apparently Textbook Center has some of them, which is a total disaster. Okay, so the gender ideology we talked about last time briefly. John Money was the first to use the word gender in reference to human characteristics. And he developed the gender ideology. And he said that gender is different from biological sex. It's self-identified, it's fluid, and can be changed at will, which of course is a lie, because sex is determined at the moment of your conception. When the female gamete meets the male gamete in fertilization, that is when your sex is determined. And it's just recognized at birth. It's not assigned at birth. So language is very important. And so to try and prove his theory, you can check the gender reassignment controversy case. That is the family that there were these two twins that were born, and one of them had, David had a problem with his penis, which was burnt in a circumcision. And so John Money decided to experiment and said, let's just raise him as a girl and don't tell him that he's a boy. He was born as a boy. And he used to sexually abuse them in his office. He was a psychologist. And then it came out later that they were so traumatized by that experience, and that they died by suicide later on. And the father also died by suicide. So that was a totally failed experiment. But John Money pretended that it had worked, and that raising him as a girl, David as a girl, had been successful. So that's the gender theory for you. It's a total lie. And I don't know why we still continue using the word gender. Yeah, so the gender ideology is represented by the acronym LGBTQIA, although the I doesn't belong there because intersex is a genuine disorder of sexual development. It stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer questioning, or asexual. And that's represented by the gender-bred person. The plus sign means the spectrum is open-ended, and more genders will be added to the spectrum once they are discovered and agreed on. Now they have said that there are more genders, I think over 70, approaching 100, okay? So the gender ideology, as we said, is eliminating all distinctions between men and women, except those that individuals explicitly embrace. For example, women are more likely to wear dresses, but you have something called a drag queen, which is a man basically dressed up as a woman, and so he has embraced that. So the first part of it is radical feminism, second wave radical feminism. And we talked about this in an earlier episode, so you can check out that video. Then the second part is normalizing LGBTQA with the aim of same-sex unions and redefining marriage, destruction of the human life cycle. And the third part is transgenderism, where we are now. Transgenderism is a cult that has overtaken the world. So the sexual rights, SRHR, stands for Sexual and Health and Rights. And basically, the ideology is that the 3 Ps, power, pleasure, and possessions. We talked about the kingdom mindset, and this is what has overtaken this ideology, the sexual and reproductive health and rights ideology. So it's good to know, because sometimes you might find people talking or eugenics states that started by Charles Darwin and his cousin Galton, that basically it's a pseudoscience that says that there are some superior races, blacks being at the bottom of the food chain, and blacks do not need to reproduce because they are not wanted. So there are superior races who should be allowed to reproduce, and blacks should not be allowed to reproduce. Margaret Sanger was a very ardent student of Galton, and she's one of the radical feminists. So basically you find that it's based on racism. Then you have the gender ideology, which we've talked about. with John Money. Then you have Marxism, the neo-Marxism, which I'll talk briefly about later, which has morphed into postmodernism, and then the Malthusian ideology, which is about population control, of course, starting with the undesirable races. So you need to understand the meaning of sexual and reproductive health and rights, which was started by the World Health Organization in 2015, which was co-published with the United Nations. And it has 9 parts, which says access to abortion, pleasurable and safe sexual experiences, recognition and diversity of sexual behavior and expression, the right for adolescents to sexual and reproductivization of sex work, legalization of same-sex marriage, government to provide access to cross-sex hormones with the gender reassignment surgeries. By the way, this is happening, and reproductive health and rights, this is what they stand for. The other day, somebody was talking to me about something that I'm very interested in, which is uterine fibroids. But the minute she started talking about sexual and reproductive health and rights, I stopped listening, because I know exactly what it means. But many people don't know what it means. Government to provide cross-sex hormones, sexual and reproductive needs of adolescents to include safe abortion services. By the way, there's no safe abortion. The woman is always hurt and the baby is always killed. Comprehensive sexuality education as a crucial component. So as you know, CSE is the recruiting arm, so that we get sexualized children and make them advocates for ESSA. So it's a Trojan horse for all these things, which are completely anti-health according to our definition of health. All the scientific studies have shown that all these things in sexual reproductive health and rights are completely against health and devastating to health. And the survivors of SRHR are called survivors of the sexual revolution. Okay, so postmodernism states, the philosophy of postmodernism states that God does not exist and the individual does not matter. It's the group that matters. It's all about materialism. It's anti-life and anti-family. The destruction of the family is its aim. And the victimhood status of oppressed versus oppressor. And there's a savior class that is allowed to do anything they want. That is what Dr. Morse calls the sexual state. So there's some people who are self-appointed, even unelected bodies in the world, who decide that they can do anything they want in any country that they want. This aim is totalitarian control, and they silence any dissent. And anybody who's a survivor of the sexual revolution, like somebody who has undergone transgender surgery, what they call sex reassignment surgery, who regrets it, they're told to shut up, and they're not allowed to speak out. Women who have had abortions, who regret their abortions, for example, the Silent No More movement, they're told to keep quiet because there's a lot of money in SRHR. Yep, so you have the Alice Bailey and the New World Order, and the book that she wrote in 1959 called The Externalization of the Hierarchy. And she dedicated this book to a demon. In order for you to understand what's happening in the world today, you need to know these items. Take God and prayer out of the education system, reduce parental authority, destroy the traditional Christian family structure. If sex is free, make abortion legal and easy. Make divorce easy and legal, free people from the concept of marriage for life. Make homosexuality an alternative lifestyle. Debase art, making it run mad. Use the media to promote and change mindsets. So as you can see, the media and art, all forms of art, whether it's TV, whether it's plays, whether it's the radio. This is what is changing the mindset of the people. Create an interfaith movement and get governments to make all these law and get the church to endorse these changes. So actually we're in stage 10 in the new world order. So it has all been a very gradual move, but we're actually now in stage 10. Okay, so there's the depopulation agenda. Sexual and reproductive health and rights is all about depopulation. So you can get this document, NSSM 200, the Kissinger report, 1975, for you to know about the contraception and abortion agenda. In third world countries, they say that they love the women, but they actually don't love the women. They don't want them to reproduce so that they can have access to the resources of the country. Yeah, they also use vaccines. I didn't know there was a World Health Organization Eugenics Council until COVID-19. So COVID-19 vaccine is also a depopulating agent. Yeah, so basically vaccines, you have the scandal of 2014 in which women were sterilized in Kenya against their will, and they're still living today with their testimonies by the World Health Organization. Yeah, so you have the Obergefell decision of 2015, and it's all a slippery slope because right now we have somebody called minor attractive persons, where love is love and love is gender and age blind. So a grown-up person can be in love with a child, and you have this pedophile here who is saying that I'm happy that LGBT Foundation is finally speaking out for the pedosexual right. So if you talk against it, you're called a bigot and you're called a Nazi. But this is where we have reached now, people calling themselves minor attracted persons. Okay, so this is a slippery slope, and this is the boiling frog syndrome, where if you put, the idea is that if you put a frog in, if you throw a frog into hot water, it'll jump out immediately. But if you gradually bring the water to a boil, then the frog will actually die, because they will just continue staying there in the hot water until they're cooked to death. And that's where we are now. I hope we can jump out in time. Okay. So there has also been, we talked about the gaps in the medical system. There's been gaps in the mental health care system. The diagnostic statistical manual, since the diagnostical statistical manual is about the mental disorders. And so it has been in existence since 1952, but it has been manipulated since 1972. And it was due to political ideologies. It had nothing to do with health. So you had Dr. John Fryer, who appeared with a mask in 1972 at one of the meetings, and he declared that he's a psychiatrist and he's also homosexual. And he gave a speech that made them decide that they were going to change same-sex attraction and make it and normalize it. So that was the origin. The first time it was manipulated in 1972. 1973, the American Psychological Association declared the same-sex attraction to be a variant of the normal. So it was a political ideology. It was not based scientifically. And so, yeah, basically it continued like that. And you had the gender dysphoria, which was also, it also was first called gender identity disorder, and then later it was changed to gender dysphoria to reduce the stigma. but now it is being normalized as normal, and there's a push by the World Health Organization and the American Psychological Association not to treat people who feel that they're trapped in the wrong body, either male or female. And so they're making a lot of money from cross-gender hormones, cross-sex hormones, and cross-sex, what they call gender reassignment surgery. Okay, so we talked about that definition earlier. We're going back to it. And we also, just a reminder that they have a lot of people, these individuals have a lot of adverse childhood experiences, especially emotional abuse, followed by physical abuse, household mental illness, and sexual abuse. And so they people who need a lot of love and understanding, and to get to the root cause of the problem. So there's somebody called the gender-bread person, which identifies the different parts of the human person accordingly to sex, which can be male or female, and they put intersex in the beginning, in the center. Then they go to the heart, which describes the orientation, and the orientation can be heterosexual, homosexual, or bisexual in the center. Then the identity is represented by the brain, which can be woman, man, or gender queer. And then you have the expression, which can be feminine, masculine, or at the center, androgynous. Yeah, so you have the four aspects: sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, and sex development. And although they put intersex here, it really doesn't belong here. So there's the idea is that the male, the sex, and your decision, you can decide, because gender is fluid. You can decide what you want to be today and tomorrow, which of course is not true. So sexual orientation refers to one sexual orientation towards something or someone. So you have even bestiality. You can be attracted to an inanimate object. You find that somebody can be married to a tree in some countries, things like that. There are over 70 sexual orientations that have been conceptualized, okay, on an orientation master list, which I won't share here. I've given the references. And we'll just give an example of the gender-bread person using this person called Max. And can somebody describe whether it's male, whether this is a male or a female? Maybe we can just get one person since we're running out of time. Anybody wants to volunteer? According to the gender-bread person, is this a male or a female? Any volunteer?
Said
Female or
Pauline
male?
said female.
Female.
Somebody says she looks like female. S. Moniz, whatever star. Chris Mutua, female. Many people seem to see him female.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, can you please mute
male?
the person?
Somebody has said male. Two people.
Some
Doris Mwangi is hermaphrodite. Somebody notable to tell. Rosemary said male. Lee Kenny said male. So there is no agreement.
Oh, okay. So the whole idea of this is to confuse you thoroughly. We have about 50% saying male and 50% female. Okay. So this is the situation with this person. Yeah. And this person wants to be addressed by these pronouns: he, him, his. Gender identity, boy. Sex assigned at birth, female. We've just said there's no such thing as assigned at birth. It's just recognized and determined at the moment of conception. Sexual orientation, bisexual. So are you understanding the application of the gender-bread person to this one? And once you have LGBTQ legalized in your country, the minute you call him her, she, even if you're the parent and the person is underage, you will be jailed or the child taken from you. Yeah. So there's this whole nonsense of misgendering through the wrong pronouns. And it's causing a lot of confusion in those countries. And you also have men entering women's bathrooms and men entering women's sports and assaults happening. We've had men entering women's jails and impregnating them. So this is a lot of confusion that can happen in your country as a result of legalizing things which you don't understand. Yeah. So lesbian is a same-sex attracted person. So you have the female version. In a relationship, you have the one who's the female, the one who's a male, female being a femme, the butch being the one who exhibits a masculine identity. Then you have a stud, which is a Black Latino butch. So they have all these kind of words. You might hear your children talking about these. So it's important for you to understand what each means. A STEM is a lesbian who exhibits some stereotypical butch traits without fitting the masculine stereotype associated with the butch lesbians. So even in the male same-sex attracted people, you find that they have one who's more feminine and one who's more masculine. An example would be McKenna and Jerry. This is a Kenyan who identifies as the male in the relationship, the more masculine relationship, the more masculine person in the relationship, and she has gone public. Now, intersex is a disorder of sexual development, and they're either male or female, but the external genitalia at birth are difficult to recognize. And so, for example, James Karanja, he was raised as a girl, and the sex usually comes out in puberty. We also have talked in detail about disorder of sexual development, so I don't really want to go into it. So if you raise since the parents are embarrassed to say we don't know whether it's a boy or a girl, they usually raise the child in the sex of their choice. And if they're lucky, when the secondary sexual characteristics appear in puberty, then it will coincide. If they're not lucky, then it will be different. Like he was raised as a girl, and then in school, when his male sexual characteristics started appearing, he was being called a lesbian, and he was punished for that. But this is a disorder of sexual development, and they need to be helped through the Disabilities Act and a lot of psychosocial support being given to the families. Okay. So we need to know about the causation, and because you know the legalization of same-sex union in the United States was based on the wrongful assertion that homosexuality is an immutable trait, which is exactly like being your race. Yeah, being black, deception. Nobody is born that way. There's no evidence that people are born homosexual and therefore they cannot change. And so there's no scientific evidence. There's no gene that has been found. And over time, when people are left to their own devices, they're more likely to shift to heterosexuality. And it's not hardwired in their DNA, as studies of identical twins have proven. That because if it was genetic, then 100% of the time, the other identical twin would be having same-sex attraction. But a huge study has shown that it only happens 11% of the time. So the primary factor in homosexuality is environmental, not genetic. And some of these environments include having a very dominant, supportive mother and a weak, remote, or hostile father. And the Oedipus and Electra complexes. This is the relationship between the child and the parent of the opposite sex, as well as the relationship of the parents with one another and the parent of the same sex. So it's quite complicated. You can have a dysfunctional mother-daughter relationship, son-father relationship, the traumatic death of a parent, divorce, sexual abuse. So it's about an unmet emotional need which has been sexualized, and trying to meet that emotional need through sexual relationships. Pornography is also causes sexualization. And that is one of the aims of comprehensive sexuality education, sexualizing the child. It's called the gateway drug, because once you're a consumer of pornography, you're more likely to see any sexual gratification as normal. Lack of fit with adolescent peers. This is very common, especially in boys who identify as same-sex attracted. They're not accepted by their peers, and they get into gender confusion and lack of security with those who are the same sex. And then you remember the age group of adolescence is about the identity crisis. So the peer group and teasing and bullying is it seems to be a common thread in the history of these individuals. Yeah. So we're going to talk about some of the health concerns, although I've seen that I don't have much time left. So there are multiple negative health outcomes for people who act out on same-sex attraction. And we're just going to go through some of them. The Gay and Lesbian Medical Association, GLMA, has a list of health issues that are more prevalent in homosexuals, which includes cancers like oral, anal, colon, prostate, testicular, STDs like HIV, AIDS, hepatitis, syphilis, mental illness like depression, anxiety, suicidal tendencies, eating disorders, body image problems, drug and alcohol abuse, a shortened lifespan for between 8 and 20 years who practice a homosexual lifestyle. And although some claim that these dysfunctions are a result of discrimination and societal pressures in the countries, the same kinds of dysfunctions are found in higher levels, even in cultures and countries where the practice is widely accepted. For example, the Netherlands, where this behavior is widely accepted, same-sex attraction behavior, they still have the same kind of pathology. So it's not related to the pressure, society pressure. Men who engage in homosexual behavior are called MSMs, who engage in sodomy. They have increased risk for STDs and antimicrobial resistance. That is the bacteria that don't respond to drugs, antimicrobials. They have a much higher rate of HIV/AIDS, up to 430 times more than heterosexual men. Homosexuals in the US account for less than 2% of the population, and yet they account for more than 81% of the new infections, HIV infections among men. They have a higher number of lifetime sexual partners in the hundreds, a higher rate of partner change and partner acquisition rates, and they're significantly more promiscuous, with very few maintaining fidelity. And for example, rectal prolapse, yeah? You know that the rectum and the anus, this is an exit. It's not supposed to be an entrance. The vagina is an entrance, and it is designed for that. But the rectum was designed to be an exit, and it has only one single layer of cells. So when it is exposed to that kind of trauma, you have the rectum prolapsing, and many of them need to wear diapers. Yeah. In fact, there's a movement which is called Save the Sphincter. because this sphincter is not designed to be entered from this end. Yeah. So sodomy is very harmful for your health. And remember earlier this year, when the body of an LGBTQ activist was found in a suitcase, apparently murdered, there was a whole hullabaloo from the Western world. He was called Edwin Chiloba. And when they found out that he had been killed by his partner, they went completely silent. Yeah. So this just shows you that they're not very genuine about their agenda in our country, because they wanted to make it seem like a hate crime from people who don't believe in that ideology, but they do have a lot of violence, as we'll see later. Women who engage in homosexual behavior, they also have domestic violence. They have sexual coercion, drug and alcohol abuse, anxiety, depression resulting in suicide, breast cancer, and that kind of thing. Youth also, they have depression, anxiety, truancy from school, suicide, alcoholism, substance abuse, and high-risk sexual behavior. Children, actually children who experience same-sex attraction grow out of it, and usually 80%, and adopt a heterosexual orientation when they're left alone. But in our current society that tells them, affirms them, that says, yes, you must be same-sex attracted and continue with that, you know, is very dangerous when you prematurely label the adolescent as that and you reward them. So they now start identifying as that because they're going through an identity crisis. So they're also at risk for mental health problems, depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation. And they found that when a child is left alone, for every year a child postpones identifying as a homosexual, the suicide risk drops by 20%. So when it's possible, but now the culture is that, oh no, you must be that. So therefore, all right. So we talked about how the homosexual lifestyle was formerly thought to be because of society pressure, but it was found to be also present in countries where the behavior is accepted, which shows that it's more related to the lifestyle itself. Yeah, so same-sex parenting versus opposite sex shows that the outcomes are very bad, with a negative impact on children. And same-sex couples fare, worse in a wide range of outcome categories. Remember the wellness wheel? Than those raised by heterosexual married couples. They're twice as likely to have a developmental, learning disability, emotional problems like ADHD, psychological disorders, emotional problem, major depression, anxiety, conduct disorders, and they're also likely to get sexual confusion, much more likely, and to adopt the homosexual lifestyle themselves. There's something that mothers give that fathers cannot give, and there's something that fathers give that mothers cannot give. And when you're being raised by parents of the same sex, you completely miss out on that complementarity between husband and wife. So negative academic outcomes, 65% are less likely to graduate. And yeah, so that is the problem. So this, you have the alcoholic tendencies, the suicide tendencies, drug, self-harm is much, much higher. You also have violence in between same-sex attracted couples. There is violence in heterosexual couples, but it's 2 to 3 times more common. I'll share you the studies at the end. The relationships are also very unstable, lasting only 2 to 3 years on average. And And even those who are in a self-described committed relationship are more likely to be promiscuous. The sexual orientation change efforts. Okay, it's not about changing the sexual orientation. It is about going to the root cause of the problem and healing the underlying trauma. So it has not been found to be harmful, and there are scientific studies, and the emphasis is on treating the underlying trauma, and people have actually managed to change. But when they change, they are suppressed and they are silenced, because the people who want to push this narrative want to make people think that people are born that way. Yep. So the top 5 gay myths is that you have the number one myth is that it is immutable. And also there was also a lie that 10% of the American population was homosexual or same-sex attracted, and they found that it was actually less than 2% of the general population. Then you can watch this documentary, Understanding Same-Sex Attraction, on YouTube, and you'll be able to understand more in more detail what I have said. familywatchinternational.org. Yeah, gender identity disorder, which has been called transgender issues. There's a lot of disinformation about gender dysphoria, and it's about feeling that you're trapped in the wrong body. And so we really need to understand this. The Diagnostic Statistical Manual for Mental Disorders was also greatly manipulated. So I had talked about that earlier. So it was recognized, gender identity disorder was recognized as a mental disorder for many years. And then it was removed from the DSM in 2013 and replaced with gender dysphoria. And then it was changed. The change was not because of any new scientific evidence, but it was rather political. And so as a result of this political change, medical professionals were discouraged from trying to treat the dysphoria, and people were encouraged to see it as something normal, which of course it is not. And so these are some of the survivors of the gender identity, the gender ideology. You have Walt Hare, who has formed an association called Trans Regret Movement. And you have Chloe here, who was also tried to transition into a boy by having her healthy breasts cut off. And in America right now, this is what happens when you legalize this. Your healthy breasts can be cut off. Healthy sexual organs can be cut off without a parental consent. This is actually not the practice of medicine. This is actually butchery and lying to children. So she has come out openly, and Walt Hare, who was born as a man and became tried to undergo surgery to become a woman and now became a man again. So actually you cannot change your sex. It's actually impossible. And so most of these people regret that. We have also Scott Nugent. You can also check Scott Nugent. He has had 7 surgeries. He's had a pulmonary embolism. He's had a heart attack. He's had recurrent infections, 16 rounds of antibiotics. You know, they tried to make a false penis. He was a beautiful woman before, but he suffered from gender identity disorder due to childhood trauma. So he's really, really suffered, and he's also, she has made a lot of videos on YouTube. So you see, if somebody, you have a disease like anorexia nervosa, in which a woman may look at the mirror and she sees a fat person. This is a mental disorder, yeah? So if you really, if a doctor was to see this person and she said, I'm too fat, and she looks like this, And so if the doctor was to agree with her and put her on a diet, will that really be practicing medicine? That's exactly what they're doing. With gender identity disorder, somebody comes and says they're trapped in the wrong body, and you go and you do cross-gender hormones, and you do what they're calling gender reassignment surgery. That is butchery. That's not medicine, okay? So we need to get that very clear. Girls are XX chromosomes and boys are XY chromosomes. Sex is not assigned at birth. Sex declares itself in utero and is determined at conception. So intersex has also been described in a previous video. So most young children are confused about their sexual identity. They come to accept their biological sex as they grow up. Even those who grew up with tomboys, those girls, when they were left alone, they later on grew up to form families, and healthy families at that. For example, 80% to 90% accept their biological identity upon reaching adulthood. Okay, so the quality of evidence for true benefit of hormonal therapy and cross-sex surgery or gender dysphoria is very low. There's absolutely no benefit for that. And yet we're having doctors who are being sponsored by LGBTQ organizations, even in Kenya, to give cross-sex hormones. And this is completely wrong and against the Hippocratic Oath. So no scientific studies have proven that transgenderism is genetic. No evidence has been found that the brains of transgender individuals were wired differently at birth. And even if somebody was to come 100 years from now and check a female pelvis, you'll be able to know from the skeleton alone whether this was a woman or this was a man. Our pelvises are completely different. Yeah. So women and men are different. So the so-called treatment of gender dysphoria with cross-sex hormones, puberty blockers, and sex reassignment surgery is founded upon ideology, not medicine. And this has to be stopped immediately. And this is why we cannot legalize this issue in our country. So if you read more about demographic winter, you'll know that sexual and reproductive health and rights, SRHR, is a very dangerous philosophy. As we speak, the Western civilizations are not able to replace their populations. They're declining in their population. For a population to replace itself, it must have an average of 2.4 women per child. And so this is a very dangerous philosophy that must be rejected at all costs. We should promote marriage and reject all marriage substitutes. We need to encourage large families, stop subsidizing contraception, and start subsidizing procreation, end abortion, which is the worst form of gender-based violence, stop all population control propaganda, stop comprehensive sexuality education in schools, create a family-friendly culture and make it easier, not harder, for couples to have kids, encourage religious practice because couples who are religious have more children, and have pregnancy resource centers, and advice on crisis pregnancy and post-abortion healing, because you have organizations like Marriage Stops, which have been here since 1985, they've been killing children. So we have women in their 60s, in their 50s, in their 40s who are suffering from post-abortion syndrome because abortion is not healthcare. Yeah, so we have the proverbial David and Goliath. These people, sexual and reproductive health and rights NGOs, have a lot of funding. And this is us, and our stone is the truth. Our stone is compassion. Our stone is our ability to connect with people. It is not us against them. It is just embracing the whole of humanity, accepting them as human beings, as well as helping them to understand that their sexuality has been disordered. In the same way we talk about sexual disorders, disordered sexual behavior is also fornication, is also adultery, is all these practices which are outside the God's will for sexual relationships to be between a husband and wife in a covenant relationship called marriage. So we're not isolating them and saying you are evil and you are horrible. It's always the chance for repentance, always the chance for coming back to who they were designed to be by the Creator. Yeah, we don't have the money, but we have the truth and we have the compassion. And when God is on our side, nobody can be against us. Yeah. So it is actually spiritual warfare. We need to really pray about this. With the helmet of salvation, the breastplate of righteousness, the belt of truth, the shield of faith, the sword of the Spirit, and the shoes of the gospel of peace. This is how we shall win this war, because God is on our side. Yeah, so that is Wastahili Family Wellness, and that is our phone number. And yeah, I'm the founder and director of Wastahili Family Wellness Center, and you're most welcome. Where services include counseling for trauma, loss and grief, crisis pregnancy, post-abortion syndrome healing. We're trainers of trainers. We can come and train people in health in your organization. We're very passionate about holistic health, premarital and premarital counseling, coaching in fertility awareness, character development, life skills, parenting, addiction recovery, and we're certified mediators. So these are all the references, and the video will be shared. And sorry for taking so much of your time, and thank you for listening.
Wow, thank you so much, Dr. I'm noticing now it's 10:20. When you are giving a talk, I lose track of time. I didn't even alert you. Yeah, it was good. Yeah, thank you so much. There is one question I saw so far. Let me see if I can access it. Okay, Otieno, can you see the question? Yeah, from Doris Mwangi. May I ask, is there anything biological that can cause this? I believe she means those sexual issues, the LGBTQ. Is there anything biological?
Okay, they said that the studies show that there's actually no gene, and the majority of the causation is by environmental influences. And environment is through adverse childhood experiences, of which we described. They can be sexual, they can be emotional abuse, they can be physical abuse, but especially sexual and emotional. And usually sexual and emotional abuse and neglect, neglect can be emotional and physical. And then you have household dysfunction. And usually with household dysfunction and emotional abuse and neglect, they go hand in hand. So when you have the situation, the number one need of a child is the love between the parents. And so if there's no love between the parents, then the child is already traumatized. And then so it's a very complex relationship, like in Oedipus, between the mother and the parent of the same sex, that's the father, and the daughter, the parent between her relationship with her mom and her relationship with the parent of the opposite sex. So that is a very delicate balance that happens, and every family is different. For example, if a boy grows up seeing a very dominant mother and a very passive, aggressive mother and a very passive father, he might actually feel very disgusted with his father, that his father never stood up for himself. And then he goes and identifies more with the mother and that kind of thing. His masculinity is wounded. Yeah, that's just an example. But those are the interpersonal relationships. And then if he becomes effeminate and is not accepted by his peers, then that is, it just exacerbates the situation, makes it even worse. And then he lives in a society that is telling him, yes, this is your identity. And he's going through an identity crisis of between 12 and 18. So it's multiple factors.
Okay, thank
It's
you.
usually
There's also
environmental. Yeah.
Yeah.